this one here. This is the You Are Beautiful.
Oh, sure. I walk in the room, the music stops.
Are you ready?
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I have a public service announcement to begin with. This is the COVID-19 policy. As you have been told over the months, it will be updated as needed. According to the CDC, the COVID-19 community level for Polk County is currently high. UUC Lakeland's Board of Trustees recommends that if you're sick, please stay home and join us virtually on Zoom, YouTube, or Facebook. If you are unvaccinated or a high-risk individual, we recommend that you consider wearing a mask if joining us in person, or consider remaining home and joining us virtually. For all others, we trust that you decide to wear mask or unmask based on your personal assessment. Research has indicated that for the best mask protection, individuals should use N95 4-layer surgical masks or FFP2s. Other masks may provide some, but less protection. As a community, we want to do our best to look out for each other and support one another in line with our 8 principles and our values. Yes. Welcome to the worship service of the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Lakeland. My name is Petra Sussman. I use the pronouns she and her. We're glad you're here, whether in person or virtually. UUCL is an affirming community, and whatever your gender identity, sexual orientation, race, ethnicity, abilities, or theological beliefs, you are welcome here. We would love to get to know you better, so please join us after the service on the patio, or if on Zoom, please say hello through the chat feature. Our newsletter is published every Wednesday, and it is the main source of information for what goes on around here. So be sure to sign up. If you already receive it, be sure to read it to find out about all the great things happening around here. Of special importance that you would want to know, besides the call to community that's been flashing on the board all morning long, our social justice meeting is at 12:30 p.m. today in the sanctuary. Their Pride in Faith service is June 16th, and Pride in the Park is June 18th. Our Pride service will be here June 19th. Our annual dinner celebration is June 8th. That's a Wednesday, and it's also going to be here, and it is a potluck. Now, I often hear compliments on the services. To a great part, is due, of course, to our spiritual life director, Heather Norby. She does depend on our worship committee, and as chair of that committee, I am in search of able minds and bodies who want to be creative. We laugh a lot in the process. We really do. For this month of May, our worship and programming theme is Nurturing Beauty. Let us continue our journey together by entering into this sacred space where we celebrate our connected circle of life. And in that vein, in gratitude, I want to thank everyone who made Portia Westerfield Kroll's celebration of life such a great success. Ken and Dorothy, Heather, myself, Mark, Joshua, Brandon, and Justin, and all the others who helped support Jim Kroll in his time of need. Lots of people made food. Tom and Marcia, Ken and Dorothy, and Erin Kroll pitched in on cleanup. We're very grateful for that. We still have a canvas back there for you to add your creative tribute to Portia. So at any point, if you feel so moved during the service, preferred not, but if you do, or at any time, please add your creation to our canvas for Jim. Now, if everyone please breathe in, feeling the spirit of love in the center of your soul, and breathe out that love toward all your relations. Connected, we are whole. Please join us now as we sing hymn number 397, Morning Has Come. Words from the words. I'm getting this side. We're doing a round.
Here we go. Morning has come, night is away, rise with the sun and welcome the day. Morning has come, night is away, night is away, and rise with the sun and morning has come. Night is away, night is away, and rise with the sun and welcome the day.
Yes, our worship theme for May has been Nurturing Beauty. Recently, I read a book entitled The Joy of Mathematics. The professor gives 3 reasons to love mathematics. The ABCs of math, he calls them. The second of these reasons, the B, is the beauty. But first, let's look at the A for applications of math and C for certainty. Math is the language of science. Specifically, the laws of nature are written in calculus and differential equations, telling us how things change and grow over time. The motion of a pendulum or of galaxies can be modeled with calculus and DEs. You can also track and predict how your money grows over time. Math is also thought of as a training ground for disciplined thought, following instructions, perceiving the order inherent in things around us. If you work a problem without errors, you always get the same answer. But there's also room for creative thinking in math. There's usually more than one way to solve a math problem, and this is true of life in general, right? We applaud people who travel a different path to resolving issues, fixing things that need mending. Creative thinking in math provides the fun or joy in math. Now, have fun with me for a little bit. Did you each get a piece of paper? No. Okay, we can do this in your heads. Okay. I printed out 5 little strips. There are 5 little, you can do this in your head. 5 little instructions. Number 1, pick a number from 1 to 10. Everybody pick your number. It can be 1 or 10 or anything in between. Okay. Got it?
Don't show it, John's doing it.
Got it? Double that. Double that. Now, add 10 to the last result. Got it? Divide that result by 2. And subtract your original number that you chose from this latest result. Okay, so what did you get? What'd you get?
1.
You got 1. Okay, I'm not going to talk to you. What did you get?
5.
5. Anybody over here? 5. Okay, we'll talk later. There's this simple algebra I can show you about why we all get 5, even though we start with different numbers. See me after the worship service if you go through that again. Other fun things we do with math, we can use it in gaming, in games of chance, betting, all sorts of using probabilities and combinations. But there are serious applications of math also, like programming the path of a rocket to Mars, and projecting or modeling growth in populations like of COVID or penicillin. Now for the C in the ABCs, certainty. You always get the same answer, following the same steps, and that is true over long periods of time. The Pythagorean theorem gives the same results and is still true as it was 2,500 years ago when Pythagoras was walking around considering such things. And now, in a moment, we'll get to the B, the beauty of math.
Let us signify the creation of this sacred space where we join together to nurture beauty. Let us light our chalice, the symbol of our faith. Today our chalice lighter is Ken Wechter, or is
His husband.
it's Tim McLean.
Oh, I don't have a lighter.
It must have blown out again.
According to Stefan Banach, a Polish mathematician, mathematics is the most beautiful and most powerful creation of the human spirit.
Mathematics are the result of mysterious powers which no one understands, and which the unconscious recognition of beauty must play an important part. Out of an infinity of designs, a mathematician chooses one pattern for beauty's sake and pulls it down to earth. Marston Morse, American mathematician.
It is impossible to be a mathematician without being a poet in your soul. Sofia Kavasatsava, Russian mathematician.
Join us now in signing and singing Spirit of Life. As soon as Adam gets to the piano.
Thank you for letting me enjoy that. I don't know if you could tell, but normally it's a 4/4 song. We play it in 6/8. You can change tempos. You'll enjoy some other music that we have that's polyrhythmic. A little math experiment there. As Heather has talked about this topic in her sermons, and as we've discussed it at Wednesday night dinner worships and our small group ministry, talk to me if you want to know more about those activities. I've thought a lot about what beauty is and what it means to me. I think beauty, as most of society seems to think about it, is untrustworthy. That's a change from the old days of chivalry and fairy tales, when good knights were handsome and good princesses were beautiful, and villains and stepmothers were ugly. This still affects our modern society's view. Young is beautiful. Old, not so much. So, young is good, and old, not so much. To put it in logical terms, logic is a branch of mathematics. We might say, good is beautiful, evil is ugly. Even today we might agree with that. Therefore, beautiful is good, and ugly is evil. That's a logical fallacy. We are aware of artifice, and things that look beautiful on the outside can be misleading, or deceitful, or treacherous. I have some pics. Beautiful red berries. There's another one. Show me some more here. Tell me if you recognize these. You might. Again, beautiful. How about those? Got some blueberries. Wonderful. And the question with those berries, which of those are delicious? One of them is. 3 of them will make you really sick. The blueberries are Virginia creeper. Don't eat those. Of course, you saw the yew berries, a famous toxic poison. Actually, I've read the flesh can be eaten if you cook it, but the seed itself is very poisonous. Now we have some flowers. Wonderful, beautiful roses. Everyone thinks of Mother's Day. Look at those thorns. And the next flower, bougainvilleas. They got nice little inch-long thorns. The thorns of bougainvilleas are coated with a toxic substance that can cause dermatitis. Symptoms include a rash, pain, or tenderness and itching. Now, some of you might say it's okay. Poisonous berries are for birds, not us. Thorny flowers are for bees, not us. Anne Bronte wrote, "But he who dares not grasp the thorn should never crave the rose." And I agree. It's better to control one's own cravings than to cry from the pain. I don't have to pick a rose. I can admire beauty from afar. But what about these beautiful people and places? Don't date people like this. Don't let them in your lives. Don't let them handle your heart. And what about these places here? Gorgeous buildings, fountains in the front, and look at the interior. Beautiful, heavenly light. Don't go to this church, whatever your theology is. The Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Los Angeles, by July 2007, had to pay over $600 million through an agreement made to more than 500 alleged sexual abuse victims. Okay, thank you. I'll close with this quote that I like from the Tao Te Ching on beauty. Brilliant colors can blind the eye. Music can deafen the ear. Flavors can numb the taste. Thoughts can weaken the mind. Desires can wither the heart. The master observed the world, but trusts her inner vision. She allows things to come and go. Her heart is as open as the sky.
Okay, question. Was mathematics invented or discovered? Joshua, don't answer that. We'll talk later.
In my own defense, I misheard the instructions.
There you go.
I didn't have this.
That is a beautiful answer. Thank you. this is a question that mathematicians have debated for years. Is mathematics embedded in the physical universe around us, just waiting for some intelligence, like humans, to find it and use it? Or have we, going back 2,500 years to Pythagoras and Euclid, just created math as a way to explore and understand and ultimately use the physical environment we find ourselves in? Now, just a moment first about Pythagoras. In 1971, about 50 years ago, Nicaragua, the country of Nicaragua, decided to print new postage stamps. And they chose as a theme for these stamps the 10 most important mathematical formulae that changed the world. Pythagoras was on the second one. They printed a squared plus b squared equals c squared, you know, where c was the hypotenuse and of the right triangle, right? So that was the second stamp. Guess what was on the first stamp? Any guesses?
Zero.
This gives me goosebumps. 1 plus 1 equals 2. I kid you not, 1 plus 1 equals 2. Gives me goosebumps. We had to start counting things, right? Numerals were invented over 5,000 years ago by the Mesopotamians. And just a couple of thousand years after they did that, people like Pythagoras and Euclid and all sorts of people in all kinds of countries whose names didn't come down to us through history started doing beautiful things with these numerals. But we had to start counting some things, right, at some point. The Mesopotamian king had to know how many bales of hay he had or bushels of wheat to feed how many people he had for the coming winter, right? But if the Mesopotamians invented numbers, does that mean they invented math? I say not. We just invented the tool we needed to use the math that was inherent in the physical world all around us. All right, now say Dorothy and Ken were living a long time ago. Say they were living 70 million years ago. And one day, Dorothy was standing in a field observing 2 dinosaurs at a safe distance. And then Ken walked over, and 2 different dinosaurs followed him. All right, what do we have in this field, folks? We have 4 dinosaurs. And maybe 2 people, but maybe they ran off to a safer distance. So we had 4 dinosaurs, whether the dinosaurs knew it or not, and nobody was there to count them. So counting was important. 4 dinosaurs would be different from, say, a herd of dinosaurs. If I were a dinosaur, I'd probably want to be in a herd, just safety in numbers. So, I'm just saying. Einstein once pondered, how is it possible that mathematics, a product of human thought, fits so excellently the physical reality around us? It's spooky, really, how neatly our mathematical formula and processes have been applied to all sorts of problems and situations. And often, a field of study will adopt a process or a formula for its work that was developed years before for a totally different situation. Physicists look at the natural world and develop formulae or models to explain what they see, right? The tools they use, the models they construct, are all mathematical. When Isaac Newton felt the apple hit him on the head, if that story is true, that was a real-life apple he observed, not a formula. He thought about the moon and the ocean tides also, and he put all of these things together, all these observations together in a very clear, concise, mathematical law of nature. You could say he created these formulas, right? But were they already existing in nature, providing the physical foundation for all things, just waiting for some life force like humans to understand them? He didn't create gravity, did he? I mean, he just defined a useful language that others could follow. Gravity was already happening. Move away from the standard sciences for a minute. All sorts of fields of endeavor are using mathematical formula and processes derived by people in the past. Military intelligence statisticians need to optimize resource allocations. Stock market analysts try to predict the next market crash. They use mathematical tools developed previously by some people working in pure mathematics with no specific application in mind. But pure mathematics has a way of becoming applied mathematics, whether the original crafter of these tools likes it or not. The British mathematician Godfrey Harold Hardy, working in the early 1900s on abstract number theory, just for fun, was a staunch critic of applied mathematics. He said proudly, "No discovery of mine has ever or is likely to make the latest difference in the amenity of the world." He was wrong. A German doctor, Wilhelm Weinberg, used Hardy's work to study the evolution and genetic constitution of populations. He used Hardy's name in his Hardy-Weinberg law, sharing the credit, but Hardy probably rolled over in his grave in disgust. The same Hardy also said in 1940, "No one has yet discovered any warlike purpose to be served by the theory of numbers." Again, he had another grave rolling coming, because coding, computer programming, has become absolutely central in military communications, in peace but also in wars. Back to some well-known scientists. Johann Kepler worked on planetary motion in the early 1600s, showing that planets moved in elliptical orbits, the same ellipses studied by the Greek mathematician Menaechmus in 350 BCE, so 2,000 years before. Georg Riemann worked and lectured in the mid-1800s on new types of geometries. 1800s, 100 years before Einstein, and Einstein used those years later to explain cosmic fabric. This has happened so many times. A researcher develops a tool for explaining something, then many years later, sometimes thousands of years later, that mathematical tool is picked up to explain something else. Hello, butterfly. A mathematical language called group theory was developed by Aristide Cavrois in the early 1800s because he wanted to work on the solvability of algebraic equations. Again, just for fun. But his group theory has become the language used by physicists, engineers, linguists, and even anthropologists to describe all sorts of symmetries in the physical world. An exciting change actually developed in the process of scientific exploration because of his work. Before him, scientists would gather observations, make experiments, and from what they learned, try to develop generalized natural laws. Now, some of you are scientists, and you can tell me later if I got this right. But with the recognition in the 20th century that well-defined mathematical designs underlie the structure of the subatomic world, modern-day physicists started doing the precise opposite. They put the mathematical symmetry principles first, insisting that the laws of nature and even the building blocks of matter should follow certain patterns, and they deduced the general laws of nature from these requirements. As someone in Alice in Wonderland once said, curiouser and curiouser. So I'll leave it up to you to answer the age-old question, was math invented or just discovered as already embedded in nature, awaiting our use?
I hope I'm a good UU, and I posit a first principle, that is the inherent worth and dignity of every note. Math and music are both beautiful and in similar ways. Just take a single note. A note is more than a tone. We all know that notes have pitch and they have duration, but there's a lot more. Think, why does a clarinet sound different than a piano playing the same note? Well, the fundamentals, the basic tone, are the same, but the overtones are very different in quantity relative to another. You can think of a string or a jump rope. You can vibrate the whole thing, or you can grab the middle of it and then it vibrates in two halves. Or you and your friend can grab it 1/3 of the way across and then 2/3 and it vibrates in thirds. And then you can invite another friend and divide it into fourths and so on. And that's how notes and overtones are constructed. They go 1, the whole thing, 2, halves, 3, thirds, fourths, fifths, sixths, and so on. Very simple and very mathematical, even very Pythagorean. Pythagoras thought things were beautiful when they were divisible by whole numbers, 1, 2, 3, and that works with music too. Well, the math of overtones is actually pretty complex. Pythagoras set forth the basic theory in the 5th century BC, but such notable physicists and mathematicians as Leibniz, who also co-invented calculus and the computer-based duodecimal system, the binary system, also Kepler, Newton, and even Einstein, who was also an accomplished violinist, studied how scales and notes are put together. Well, how are scales constructed? We in Western music, and I mean West as contrasted with East, meaning Chinese, have only 2 kinds of scales, major and minor, but we do have 3 variants on the minor. And every interval is either a whole tone or a half tone, higher or lower than its neighbor. Well, these are all simplifications of the 8 Greek modes, 27 in India, and 84 in some Eastern cultures using quarter tones, dividing a half tone in half. That's hard for us to hear. Well, why do we have 12 tones in a chromatic scale, da 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 da, up to an octave? Well, there are mathematical reasons for that. In Western music and most other music, except for one, the gamelan music of Java, we hear very cleanly octaves and fifths, those 2 intervals. If they sound out of tune, we really notice. So scales have to make these intervals sound right. It turns out mathematically that the fewest notes you can make a scale out of and have the octaves and the fifths perfectly in tune is 12 semitones. Now there are other mathematical scales that people have experimented with, but if you want to make things sound equally in tune with our 12-tone scale, you have to create a scale of 41 notes for each octave. Can you imagine a piano keyboard with 41 keys for an octave? It's all based on math. So the reason scales are constructed the way they are is that we are trying to make fundamentals and the overtones, those half, thirds, and so on, sound harmonious together. It turns out, though, that that's not mathematically easy. The crux of it is that notes are ratios. They're rational. They are evenly divided by 1, 2, 3, and so on, integers. But overtones don't follow the same rules. Overtones are additive. You have A440, in the next overtone you add 220, you get 660, then you add the overtone of that, and you get plus 320, and when you add up the fundamentals of a 12-tone scale, and then you add up all the overtones, you don't come out with exactly the same note at the end of the octave. They're off by about 1/4 of a tone. Musicians would say 23 cents, with 25 cents being a 1/4 of a tone. Well, if you played those 2 together, they would sound awful. So how do you fix it? Now, if you're not a musician or a mathematician or a sound engineer, you probably haven't even considered this stuff. This clash between the overtone series, how they're constructed, and how fundamentals are constructed is called the Pythagorean gap. Pythagoras again. Well, Pythagoras experimented with different scales, and he found out that some keys just do not play nice with some other keys. There are dissonances built in. So that is why for most of Western music, music was confined to a few keys, like the key of C or the key of G, because they sound nice and they play nicely together. When you try to modulate in the same piece of music between keys, you start running into problems. So that was a problem to fix. The Orientals chose not to fix it. Their pieces are, for the most part, just one key for one piece of music, and that's it. You take an Indian raga, you can have a half an hour of music in one key, and it's continuous. Well, over the centuries, Western composers and musicians have toyed with fudging certain notes to certain degrees in order to make the overtones sound nice together within a piece. And there were various names for these, like Werkmeister III and so on, weird names. Well, then in the early 18th century came along somebody named Johann Sebastian Bach. Bach had a new idea. He said, well, everybody hears fifths and octaves pretty cleanly. Why don't we make those as in tune as we can, and then fudge every note in between so that every note is equally in tune, except they're not really. What he really did was make every note on a piano, except fifths and octaves, equally out of tune. And that was called, he wrote a huge piece of 48 keys, majors and minors, in which he showed that you could modulate between one key and another pretty smoothly using his equal-tempered system. The piece was called the Well-Tempered Clavier, a clavier being any keyboard instrument. Okay, now to the brain. How do we perceive math and music? Turns out that the brain related to music is a math machine. I can demonstrate that. You can demonstrate this for yourself. Let's say you get a phone call on your little cell phone. And as soon as you pick it up, before the caller has uttered even a single sentence, you recognize, oh, that's my Uncle Jerry. Well, there's a problem here. Because that little speaker in your phone can't reproduce Jerry's bass voice. He's a nice sonorous bass voice, and that doesn't even exist on the little speaker from the phone. The phone is only reproducing the overtones. Let's say Jerry's voice is a fundamental of 80 hertz, nice bass voice. Overtones are 160, 320, 660, and so on. The phone doesn't produce anything under 350 hertz. So how do you know it's Jerry when you can't even hear most of what is his voice coming over the cell phone? Well, the reason is that your ear-brain combination is a really good pattern recognition device. And what you have done every time you have spoken with Uncle Jerry is that your brain has recognized the overtone series of his voice. And everybody has a different overtone series. That's what makes up the timbre of their voice. So when Jerry calls, your brain is doing a very rapid calculation, putting together, well, let's see, here's the fifth overtone, here's the fourth, here's the third, let's see, they match up with, who do they match up with? Oh yeah, it's Uncle Jerry. And you know that even though you don't hear most of his voice over the cell phone. Okay. Now the way that works physiologically is that a physiologist named Helmholtz in the 19th century actually dissected the inner ear. There's an organ called the organ of Corti, also called the cochlea. It's a snail-shaped thing. And if you stretch that out, and stimulate it with sounds, notice that there's one sound for one place on the cochlea. And so when you hear a chord, you hear a map of particular points on the cochlea. In other words, spatial relations. Then the cochlea hears a sound coming in the ear, and it makes these spatial points. Then that's the pre-processing. Then it sends those spatial points to the brain, which then figures out, oh yeah, that's a certain sequence and certain ratios, and that corresponds to Uncle Jerry's voice. Most of us who are not mathematicians or musicians haven't even thought of how that all works. It's miraculous. Okay, now, symmetry and beauty. As Jeanette said, and Adam, math and music have beauty and symmetry. Take the organisms that Adam has showed. The flowers. For the most part, they are bilaterally symmetrical. And animals, if you bisect an animal from head to foot, the right half is a mirror image of the left half. So nature seems to have a preference for symmetry. Music is the same way. Pitches are of certain intervals, and music is constructed the way it is to be, for the most part, symmetrical. You take any popular song. You have an A section, then you have a B section, which is a little different, and then you go back to the A section to finish the song. Why do we do that? Because it's pleasing. Symmetry. Okay, some people have used math expressly as means of composition. I'm not talking about computer-composed music. I'm talking about much older than that. Bach and Mozart wrote pieces with math specifically in mind. Recently discovered, that was in the last few decades, was a single page of a Bach score in which he writes about 10 minutes of music in quill pen on a single page. Well, how does he do that? He wrote out the melody, and then he had instructions. Okay, first you play it straight through, then you play it backwards, then you play it upside down, and then you play it backwards and upside down, and then you take the middle note and you play it backwards and forwards, and then he did various combinations of all those things. And he came out with a beautiful contrapuntal and fugal piece, fugal meaning the same theme comes in various ways. And that was one of his famous canonical pieces, all based on mathematical permutations. Bach did it on a big scale too. Have any of you heard Bach's B minor Mass? Yeah? Okay, it's a huge piece. It's based on one note, based on a whole note. Now, Bach was a very devout Lutheran, and he, of course, in his music was expressing his faith. A whole note. It is, in its way, perfect. So that became the central note of his whole monstrous creation. That was the credo. We believe, a whole note. How can you get more solid and simple than that? And then, from that, he developed combinations and permutations, dividing the whole note into exquisite but tightly organized musical fractals. Amazing. Music and math. Okay. Well, as we know, music is not just math. It's not just an intellectual exercise, as you see in Bach and Mozart and even Schoenberg. music is highly evocative. It stirs our emotions. I think it was Shakespeare, correct me if I'm wrong, that said, music hath charms to tame the savage beast. Was it? Okay. Well, just imagine a storm, okay? Something we've all experienced. Musicians going back centuries have depicted storms in music, and they wanted to evoke the emotions that you get from witnessing a storm. Take Henry Purcell about 400 years ago, mid-17th century. He paraphrased Shakespeare's The Tempest in his own musical Tempest. Vivaldi, a little later, depicted a winter blizzard in his Four Seasons, the winter season. In the 18th century, Beethoven, I know you've all heard this. Beethoven's Sixth Symphony depicts the peasants having fun in the fields, and then a violent thunderstorm comes, complete with terrifying thunderclaps interrupting their frolics. Okay? In the 20th century, we've got lots of storm music. We've got Victory at Sea. One piece of that by Richard Rogers depicts the Pacific as boiling over, as he put it. And Benjamin Britten, the English composer, he wrote his 4 sea interludes while on a transport ship crossing U-boat infested North Atlantic waters in the middle of World War II, depicting a storm at sea, among other things. Now, finally, music is concrete, as we've seen. It's based on physical and mathematical rules, but it is also very abstract. It exists all by itself on its own plane. It's kind of like Plato's ideas. You know, there's a plane of ideas that are above what we humans ordinarily live. Sounds are concrete phenomena, but music is an abstraction that exists everywhere. It is separate from the world we live on, but of that world. Now, even though music is an abstraction, it's very necessary. Just think of this. There are about 6,000 languages and dialects in the world. Now, each one is based, of course, on the conditions and the culture in which that language arose. But every single culture has some sort of music. Why is that? We can't eat music. We can't clothe in it. We can't shelter in it. We can't use music as a tool. But everybody has music. If we didn't have it, we would be much diminished, and frankly, in my opinion, we would not be quite human without music. Okay. Now, scientists have known this, at least intuitively. Carl Sagan, about 50 years ago, caused to be put aboard a robot spaceship, the Voyager 7, that is now exploring outer space past our solar system. He had put aboard a gold record with some of the world's music and some of the math explaining that music, and a pictorial instruction on how to play it, in the hopes that any alien out there who discovers this record would know something about humans and music. Math and music are inextricably intertwined beauties. Music and math are of nature. They follow natural and mathematical rules, and that can be quantized by human intelligence. But music and math are so much more than that. They are flights of human reasoning and fantasy from this world, but in a universal plane above it. To me, the American poet Henry Wadsworth Longfellow summed up the development, future, and beauty of math, music, and some other human endeavors in my favorite poem, The Builders. Build today, then strong and sure, with a firm and ample base, and ascending and secure, shall tomorrow find its place. Thus alone can we attain to those turrets where the eye sees the world as one vast plain and one boundless reach of sky.
I feel edumacated. Let us turn to honor the weavings of joys and sorrows that run throughout all our lives. We engage in this ritual every week as a way to nurture and as a way to heal, knowing that we are all in this together. We invite you up to the chalice table to place stones in the water. Guess who forgot the water again? For the joys and sorrows you carry with you today. Green is for joy, white is for concern, and blue is for sorrow. If you're on Zoom, we will say your name and put a stone in for you so that we all know we are together and connected, striving towards wholeness. If you want a specific color stone put in for you, please say so in the chat. Otherwise, we'll put a green stone in for you because it is a joy to have you with us virtually. Does anyone know if we have anyone on Zoom?
Yes. Glenda says, please put a stone in for peace in our lives. Also, please put in a stone for Judy Pell, who's with us, and Sarah and Terry.
Thank you.
Math is beautiful. I learned quickly in school that math is more trustworthy than any other academic subject. I had a teacher for a dad. But I didn't have to listen and echo a teacher in math. No math teacher ever got insulted or upset by my interpreting things my own way. I could be right on my own. History, English, lots of opinions. Even facts are open to reinterpretation. Science at least admitted that there was so much we didn't know. but was still unavoidably riddled with errors, unavoidably. In most subjects, the goal is to digest facts and then regurgitate it in a socially acceptable manner. But I'm a UU. Only math teaches you how to think. Have you ever wondered how you know something? A college class made it clear for me what I already sensed in elementary school. There's two ways. You're either told something and have to believe it, or you see it for yourself and have to trust your senses and your memory. The former is called rhetoric, and of course the Greeks and Romans studied it extensively. We don't do that much anymore. The latter is called empirical knowledge, and the Renaissance shaped this into science. Now, what about religion? That, of course, depends on faith, not knowing. If you know it, you don't have faith. And sometimes I think it may have nothing to do with the real world. Math, though, is different. It works on pure theory and logic. And we are surrounded by math. So, I also love history. I also love language. So, for my fellow language lovers, what is math? Well, it comes from the Greek, mathematikos, from mathematia, which means literally science. The base is manthien, which means to learn. Now, science comes from the Latin scientia, from scire, to know. And all of our ologies, biology, sociology, come from the medieval Latin logia, from the Greek logic. And logic, Greek logike, the art of reason, comes from the word logos, the word. So, from language, you get math and science. For me, math is simple. Math is about looking for patterns. Now, there's that lovely fractal come up there. You can see patterns over and over again, reappearing. Patterns are beautiful. Now, for some people, nicely ordered math is beautiful, and nicely ordered patterns are beautiful. Regular shapes, grids, mosaics, symmetry. Look at these beautiful patterns in nature, and then they're copied by humans. We have hexagons. Beautiful little church right there. This architectural marvel, Isfahan, is Iran. Dates all the way back to the 700s, but it's been continually expanded and modified through the centuries. Decorative tile and brickwork coat the four gates. One of the most distinctive elements is the honeycombed archway. Now we have some square patterns. We got these in our bathroom, of course. You have some nice pink salt crystals that occur in nature with square patterns. And ooh, that could be gold. No, it's pyrite. But they both have that same cubical structure. And then, of course, we have mankind reproducing squares all over in beautiful patterns. Lots of squares. This is, of course, in Tehran. That's the Golestan Palace. Tiles adorn the walls and ceilings of the pond house, used as a summer chamber. We have star shapes. That's a papaya. We have starfish. I also want to say Jeanette, of course, wore a lovely starfish brooch. Snowflakes. And, of course, star patterns right here. This is from the 13th century, made in Iran, again, with the 8-pointed star-shaped tile. And check out this beautiful building. Now, this one literally glows because it's got all these mirrors everywhere. But there are all kinds of star-tiled patterns all around the archways. This is the Shah Sharah, a funeral monument. Beautiful, just like the Taj Mahal, a beautiful funeral mausoleum. Okay, lots of symmetry, lots of great stuff. Now, I wanted to talk to you a little bit, I'm going to be quick, about fractals, non-symmetrical beauty that you can see in math. A couple things to remember. Chaos occurs from these basic points. One, you have iteration, which means doing the same thing over and over again. That's where you get evolution from. That's where you get all this weird stuff that happens when things interact. And that produces, or I should even say, like, destroys scale. In nature, and I put to you in theology, scale is irrelevant. And you'll see self-similar actuations in these shapes here. And from that, you get these really interesting edges. That's where all the edges, things happen, and our things are really beautiful on the edges between two things. Self-similarity shows up in many real-world objects and phenomena. Let's take a look at this nautilus shell. Sacred geometry. We have a nice little self-similar reproduction as it goes on. With trees, this is a quintessential fractal that you'll notice. From the trunk to the branches of branches, to the branches of branches of branches, to the twigs of twigs, to the pine needles, to the leaves. You get the same self-similar patterns showing up. Check out these pine cones. Pine cones, of course, they're scaly fruits, and they grow and have this satisfying spiral coming off of the pine cones. Fractal design will occur in accelerated growth, growth that gets faster and faster and faster. You're doing the same thing over and over again. This is a natural example of a logarithmic growth. Okay, and then we have a succulent right here, nice little spiral. And again, the inner leaves, which are small, are the same, but just a different scale of the outer leaves, which are large. That's, of course, an aloe plant. About 20 years ago, there was a mathematician who hypothesized that the spiral pattern of both plants and fingerprints occur for the same reason, to relieve stress. Isn't that nice? Check out these. Anyone know what those are? Those are brachia inside the human lungs. Again, a branching structure. Look at this next beauty. Gorgeous. A riverbed. And you have the same sort of rivers going over. And you have, of course, with leaves, fractal designs as their little cells expand to fill in the gaps between the veins. Same patterns over and over again. The next one right here. This is something you'll get in your morning coffee. It's your foam in your latte. Any kind of foam you look at up close, you get bubbles that are contacting other bubbles. And again, independent of scale, you get the same physical properties happening in them. And we have, are these really large bubbles? Can you tell, how big is this cloud? Is it really big? Or is this something that is so small, it's just like, you know, on the molecular level you could see it? Yeah, it could be either one, right? You're just observing the interactions right there. They're very self-similar. Clouds have what they call puffs and wisps. Just moving between the two things. Now I'm going to close with one last one. This is not a computer-generated image. This is an actual photograph of the Romanesco broccoli, cousin of the cauliflower. Look at those cool twists, and look how it grows the same on itself. Each little nodule has nodules, which has nodules. There's like 4 or 5 levels of self-similarity in this. I've never eaten one. Hopefully it's delicious. Thank you.
I'm just sitting there and I'm listening to so much beauty. Wow, beautiful music, beautiful nature. We have now come upon the moment when we can share our treasures with this community as an act of faith. When we each give what we can back to life, we serve a greater good, creating a powerful beauty that can change the world. While our ushers pass the plates for your offering, we're going to enjoy some music. And is it Adagio, Hayden?
No, it's a polytheonic.
It's polytheonic.
Polytonic.
Polytonic.
Enjoy.
Very quiet.
One minute.
But how does all of this that we've discussed relate to beauty in general? The symmetry, the patterns we keep finding, the music, the absolute applicability of simple formulae developed by researchers to fields of study not yet even dreamed of. That's beauty. And I might stretch the word beauty. It's not just sensual and physical. I see astounding beauty all around me. From the concept of goodwill and justice, to actions taken by people of goodwill, to thwart evil, to help other people achieve justice. Any actions, any relationships that advance the human condition, indeed the condition of the world around us, are beautiful. Our seventh principle holds up for respect the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. How can we not feel respect, even awe, at the inherent complexity we find every day in this amazing physical world? Looking at some of the math tools developed by humans that we've looked at today and the simplicity in their applications to all sorts of activities, now that is beautiful.
Please join me as we extinguish the chalice. We extinguish this chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of love, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts and out into the world.
So how does the beauty of math contribute to nurturing? We use it every day in many ways to nurture, to foster our understanding, our grasp of the dynamic beauty all around us, the beauty in nature and in each other.
Go now into the world. And remember what Paul Thurston, American mathematician, said: mathematics is not about numbers, equations, computations, or algorithms. It is about understanding.